The day my parents told me they couldn't afford my college tuition, I believed them. I hugged my mom. I told my dad not to worry, and that same afternoon, I filled out another student loan application. 3 days later, I accidentally discovered they had written a $180,000 check. Not for me, not for my education, but for my cousin's medical school. That was the moment I realized I had never been their first choice. 15 years later, the same parents who told me to figure life out on your own were sitting across from me in my office, asking me to save the retirement they had spent a lifetime building. But before I tell you what happened, you need to know how everything began. My name is Ethan Brooks. I grew up in a small town outside Denver. My parents weren't wealthy. Dad owned a small hardware store. Mom worked part-time at the local library. We lived comfortably, but every dollar mattered from the time I was 12. Dad told me the same thing. Study hard, Ethan. One day will help you graduate without debt. Those words became my motivation. I studied every night, graduated near the top of my class, skipped parties, worked weekends. I believed every sacrifice would be worth it. Then there was my cousin, Nathan. He was only a year older than me. Nathan wanted to become a doctor. The entire family admired him. Every holiday dinner revolved around his achievements. Future surgeon, the pride of the family. The one who's going to make us all proud. I congratulated him every time. I truly meant it. I never imagined my future would become the price of his dream. During my senior year of high school, I was accepted into one of the best engineering universities in the country. The acceptance letter felt like a dream. I ran into the kitchen. "Mom, Dad, I got in." Mom hugged me tightly. Dad smiled. "I knew you could do it." That night, we celebrated with pizza and chocolate cake. For a few hours, everything felt perfect. I had no idea. The hardest conversation of my life was only a week away. 1 week after my acceptance letter arrived, Dad asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. Mom was already there. Neither of them looked happy. Dad folded his hands. "Ethan, we need to talk about college." I smiled. "I've already started looking at dorms." He didn't smile back. Instead, he looked down at the table. "I'm sorry, we can't afford your tuition." For a moment, I thought he was joking. "What about the college fund?" Mom quietly looked away. "There isn't one anymore." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Dad took a deep breath. "We had to make a difficult decision." I stared at him. "What decision?" He finally said the words that changed everything. "We used the money to help Nathan get into medical school." The room went completely silent. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. "The money you saved for me, you gave it to Nathan?" Dad nodded. "He has the chance to become a doctor. He'll save lives." I looked at my mother. She couldn't even meet my eyes. I quietly asked, "So, what am I supposed to do?" Dad answered without hesitation, "You're smart. You'll figure it out." That night, I filled out student loan applications until 2 in the morning. The next day, I applied for every scholarship I could find. When that wasn't enough, I took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store. A month later, I added a second job delivering pizzas. By sophomore year, I was working 3 jobs while studying engineering full-time. Some nights, I slept only 4 hours. Some weekends, I didn't sleep at all. But I refused to quit. Every time I felt exhausted, I remembered Dad's words, "You'll figure it out." So I did. 3 days before leaving for college, I stopped by my parents' house to say goodbye. As I walked toward the front door, I heard laughter inside. Nathan was there. So were my parents. The front door was slightly open. Before I knocked, I heard Dad proudly say, "That was the best investment we've ever made." Nathan laughed. "I won't let you down." Then my mother added, "Ethan is independent. He doesn't need us the way Nathan does." I stood frozen on the porch, holding my suitcase, listening to every word. For the first time in my life, I realized something painful. They hadn't chosen Nathan because they lacked money. They had chosen him because they believed he was worth investing in. I quietly turned around, walked back to my car, and drove to college without saying goodbye. I never went back home. Not for Thanksgiving, not for Christmas, not even for my college graduation. I buried myself in work. During the day, I attended engineering classes. At night, I stocked grocery shelves. On weekends, I delivered pizzas and repaired computers for extra cash. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but every paycheck reminded me of one thing. No one was coming to save me. so I saved myself. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. It took years to pay off my student loans, but the day I made my final payment, I smiled. Not because I was debt-free, because every dollar proved I had earned my future. A few years after graduation, I started a small software company. The first year was difficult. I worked out of a tiny office with 2 employees. Many clients said no. Some investors laughed at my idea, but I kept going. 5 years later, our software was being used by hospitals across the country. The company grew faster than I ever imagined. By the time I turned 35, yes, I had over 300 employees. Life had finally rewarded every sacrifice. One Monday morning, my assistant walked into my office. "Ethan, there's a couple here asking to see you." I looked up from my laptop. "Do they have an appointment?" She shook her head. "They said they're family." Family. I hadn't heard that word in years. "Who are they?" She hesitated. "Your parents." My heart skipped a beat. I stood up slowly. "Send them in." A few moments later, the office door opened. Dad looked older. His hair was completely gray. Mom walked beside him, holding his hand. Neither of them looked like the confident parents I remembered. Dad forced a weak smile. "Hello, Ethan." I nodded politely. "Please, have a seat." No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Dad looked around my office, then quietly said, "We need your help." My parents sat across from me in complete silence. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I'd feel angry. Instead, I just felt numb. Dad finally cleared his throat. "Our retirement fund is gone." I looked at him. "What happened?" He took a deep breath. 5 years ago, Nathan opened a private medical clinic. I already knew where this was going. He asked us to invest. Mom quietly added, "He promised we'd double our money." Dad continued, "We invested everything. Our savings, our retirement, even the money from selling the hardware store." I leaned back in my chair. "And?" Dad lowered his head. "The clinic failed. Nathan declared bankruptcy." The room fell silent. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Where is Nathan now?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "He moved overseas. He stopped answering our calls." The same cousin they believed was worth sacrificing my future for had disappeared. Dad looked directly at me. "We're not asking for millions. We just need enough to keep our house." Mom reached across the table. "We know we don't deserve your help, but you're our son." Those words echoed in my mind. You're our son. The same son they had told, "You'll figure it out." I slowly stood up, walked to the large window overlooking the city. For nearly a minute, no one spoke. Finally, I turned around. I spent 10 years figuring it out. I worked 3 jobs. I missed birthdays. I graduated with debt. Not because life was unfair, but because my own family chose someone else. Dad couldn't hold back his tears anymore. I know. And I regret it every single day. I walked back to the table. I'm willing to help. Hope immediately appeared on their faces, but not the way you expect. Dad frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm not giving you cash. Instead, I'm buying your house." They looked confused. "You'll live there for the rest of your lives, rent-free. You'll never have to worry about losing it." Mom covered her mouth. "Ethan," I continued, "but the house will legally belong to me." Dad slowly nodded. "I understand. No more risky investments. No more saving someone else while destroying yourselves." For the first time in years, Dad smiled. A small, grateful smile. "I think we finally learned our lesson." For a long moment, my parents simply stared at me. Neither of them spoke. Then my father slowly stood up. He walked around the desk. For the first time in my life, the strongest man I had ever known began to cry. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Not because we lost our money. Because we lost your trust." My mother couldn't hold back her tears either. We kept telling ourselves we were helping Nathan. But the truth is, we forgot to help our own son. I looked at them. For years, those were the words I had wanted to hear. But now, they didn't erase the past. They simply acknowledged it. 1 month later, I bought their house. Every legal document was placed in my name. My parents would never have to pay rent. Never worry about foreclosure. Never fear losing another home. When everything was signed, Dad quietly handed me an old wooden box. I've been saving this for years. Inside were dozens of photographs. My kindergarten graduation, Little League games, family vacations, and one picture I'd never seen before. It was my high school graduation. Dad had his arm around me. On the back of the photo, he had written, "One day, my son will make us proud." I looked up. If you believed that, why didn't you choose me? Dad's voice cracked because I confused potential with responsibility. I thought Nathan needed us more. I didn't realize the strongest child still needs his parents. 6 months later, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Nathan was standing there. He looked exhausted, older, nothing like the confident future doctor everyone once admired. "I heard you helped your parents." I nodded. "I did." He lowered his head. "I came to apologize. I let everyone down. Myself, your parents, and you." He reached into his backpack and placed a cashier's check on the table. $25,000. It's not much, but it's the first payment. I want to repay what they lost because of me. I looked at the check, then pushed it back toward him. "Keep it." He looked confused. "Use it to rebuild your life, but this time, build it with honesty." Tears filled his eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness." Maybe not. But everyone deserves one chance to become better. That Christmas, for the first time in 15 years, our entire family sat around the same dinner table. There were no arguments, no comparisons, no favorite child, just family. As we finished dinner, Dad raised his glass. "I spent years believing success belonged to the person with the biggest dream." He looked at me and smiled. I was wrong. It belongs to the person who never gives up. Everyone looked at me. I smiled quietly. The greatest victory wasn't building a successful company. It wasn't becoming wealthy. It wasn't even hearing my parents apologize. It was proving that the son they once overlooked never stopped becoming the man they should have believed in from the very beginning.